Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritya.
Narayanam Namaskritya.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Narottamam.
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam.
Devim Saraswati Vyasam. Tato Jaya Hridaya.
Shinvatam Shvakata Krishna.
Srinivasa Krishna.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Punya Kirtana.
Hridayanata Stavayadharani.
Varani.
Vibhunati Sritsatam.
Vibhunati Sritsatam.
Nashtra Prayasva Adhadreshu.
Nashva Prayasva Adhadreshu.
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya.
Bhagavate Sevaya.
Bhagavate Uttama-shloke.
Bhagavate Uttama-shloke.
Bhaktir Bhagavati Naistiki.
Bhaktir Bhagavati Naistiki.
Before reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayana, and unto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma Supersoul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, sends his desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. By regular attendance in class on the Bhagavatam, and by the rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Today we're going to be reading from the second canto, 7th chapter, 19th text. Tubhyam Cha Narada Krisham Bhagavan Virvrida Tubhyam Cha Narada Krisham Bhagavan Virvrida Bhavena Saru Paritushta Uvacha Yogam Bhavena Saru Paritushta Uvacha Yogam Yanam Cha Bhagavatam Atma Satatva Dipam Yagnam Cha Bhagavatam Atma Satatva Dipam Yad Vasudeva Sharana Vidur Anja Shaiva Yad Vasudeva Sharana Vidur Adya Shaiva Is that right? Anja Shaiva? Dubam Cha Narada Birsham Bhagavan Vidha Bhavena Saru Paritushta Uvacha Yogam Yanam Cha Bhagavatam Atma Satatva Dipam Yad Vasudeva Sharana Vidur Adya Shaiva Tubham Cha Narada Brisham Bhagavan Vivruda Bhavena sadhu paritushta uvacha yogam. Yanam cha bhagavatam atma satatva dipam. Yad vasudeva sharana vidur adyad shaiva.
Tubhyam cha narada vrisham bhagavan vivriddha. Bhavena sadhu paritushta uvacha yogam. Jnanam cha bhagavatam atma satatva deepam. Yad vasudeva sharanadiduranjasaiva.
Tubhyam cha narada vrisham bhagavan vividha. Bhavena sadhu paritushta uvacha yogam. Jnanam cha bhagavatam atma satatva deepam. Yad vasudevam sarada vidur anjasaiva.
Tubhyam cha narada vrisham bhagavan vividra.
Tubhyam cha narada vrisham bhagavan vividra.
Bhavena sadhu paritushta uvacha yogam. Yanam cha bhagavatam atma satatva deepam. Yavasudeva sharana vidur anjasaiva.
Tubhyam cha narada vrisham bhagavan vivriddha. Bhavanena sadhu paritushta uvacha yogam. Jnanam cha bhagavatam atma sataiva dipam. Yat vasudeva sarano viduranjasaiva.
Tubhyam cha narada vrisham bhagavan vivriddha.
Tubhyam cha narada vrisham bhagavan vivriddha.
Bhavena sadhu paritushta uvacha yogam. Yanam cha bhagavatam atma satatva deepam. Yad vasudeva sharana viduranjasaiva.
Tubhyam unto cha also Narada O Narada Brisham very nicely Bhagavan the personality of Godhead Vidrudha developed by Vena by transcendental love Sadhu your goodness Paritushta being satisfied Uvacha described Yogam service Yanam knowledge Cha also Bhagavatam the science of God and his devotional service Atma the self Satatva with all details Deepam just like the light in the darkness Yat that which Vasudeva Sharanaha.
Vasudeva Sharanaha.
Those who are souls, surrendered unto the Lord. Vasudeva, Vidu, know them. Anyasha, perfectly well. Eva, as it is. Again, this is the second canto, 7th chapter, text 19. O Narada, you were taught the science of God and His transcendental loving service by the personality of Godhead in His carnation of Hamsha-avatara. He was very much pleased with you due to your intense proportion of devotional service. He also explained unto you lucidly the full science of devotional service, which is especially understandable by persons who are souls surrendered unto Lord Vasudeva, the personality of Godhead. Please repeat. O Narada, you were taught about the science of God and His transcendental loving service by the personality of Godhead in His incarnation of Hamshavatara. He was very much pleased with you due to your intense proportion of devotional service. He also explained unto you lucidly the full science of devotional service, which is especially understandable by persons who are souls surrendered unto Lord Vasudeva, the personality of Godhead. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master and to the feet of all the Vaishnavas. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of Sri Rupa Goswami, along with his elder brother Sanatana Goswami, as well as Raghunath Dasa Goswami and Raghunath Bhatta, Gopala Bhatta, Srila Jiva Goswami. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Lord Krishna Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, along with the Veda Acharya, Gadadhar, Shivasa, and other associates. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Srimati Radharani and Shri Krishna, along with their associates, Sri Lalita and Vishaka. Purported by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
The devotee and devotional service are two correlative terms. Unless one is inclined to be a devotee of the Lord, he cannot enter into the intricacies of devotional service. Lord Sri Krishna wanted to explain the Bhagavad Gita, which is the science of devotional service, unto Sri Arjuna, because Arjuna was not only a friend of Lord Krishna, but was also a great devotee as well. The whole process is that all living entities, being constitutionally parts and parcels of the Supreme Living Being, the Absolute Personality of Godhead, have proportionately minute independence of action also. So the preliminary qualification for entering into the devotional service of the Lord is that one become a willing cooperator, and as such one should voluntarily cooperate with persons who are already engaged in the transcendental devotional service of the Lord. By cooperating with such persons, the prospective candidate will gradually learn the techniques of devotional service. And with the progress of such learning, one becomes proportionately freed from the contamination of material association. Such a purificatory process will establish the prospective candidate in firm faith and gradually elevate him to the stage of transcendental taste for such devotional service. Thus he acquires a genuine attachment for the devotional service of the Lord, and his conviction carries him to the point of ecstasy, just prior to the stage of transcendental life. Such knowledge of devotional service may be divided into two sections, namely preliminary knowledge of the nature of devotional service and the secondary knowledge of execution. Bhagavatam is in relation to the personality of Godhead, His beauty, fame, opulence, dignity, attraction, and transcendental qualities which attract one towards Him for the exchange of love and affection. There is a natural affinity of the living entity for the living service of the Lord. This affinity becomes artificially covered up by the influence of the material association. And Srimad Bhagavatam helps one very genuinely remove that artificial covering. Therefore, it is particularly mentioned herein that Srimad Bhagavatam acts like a lamp of transcendental knowledge. These are two sections of transcendental knowledge and devotional service become revealed to a person who is a soul surrendered unto Vasudeva. As it is said in the Bhagavad Gita 7:19, such a great soul fully surrendered into the lotus feet of Vasudeva is very, very rare. This verse talks about the Hamsa avatar of Lord Krishna. I found a little bit about the Hamsa avatar in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. It says that the sons of Brahma wanted to know what the perfection of yoga was, so they went to their father. But Brahma's intelligence had become bewildered by his own activities of material creation. Desiring to attain the answer to this question, he focused his mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He goes on to say in the 11th canto, 13th chapter, text 19, that at that time the Lord became visible to Brahma in the form of the Hamsa avatar. Hamsa means swan, and the specific ability of the swan is to separate milk and water, extracting only the rich, milky portion. So the Hamsa, swan avatar of Lord Krishna, appeared before Brahma to separate his pure consciousness from the molds of material nature. He goes on to say in this verse that another son of Lord Brahma, Narada, was also taught by this Hamsa avatar. Hamsa was very pleased with Narada due to his intense proportion of devotional service. Narada is a great devotee of Lord Krishna. His very name means deliverer of the Lord and the Lord's messages. He is a teacher of the science of devotional service, bhakti, loving service unto Lord Krishna. It is said that he is a transcendental spaceman. He travels throughout the three worlds, playing on his veena and singing the glories of Lord Krishna. Srila Prabhupada goes on to say in his purport that the preliminary qualification for engaging in the devotional service of the Lord is that we must become willing cooperators. And that is to say that we must voluntarily cooperate with those who are already engaged in devotional service. Now there is a wonderful example of this in the life of Narada Muni. In the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, he is teaching his pupil Vyasudeva. And he goes on to explain to him about how in his previous life he was born as the son of a maidservant who was engaged in the service of Vaishnava Brahmanas, who were engaged in the study of the philosophy of Vedanta, and how he also became engaged in their service, and how he had the opportunity to take remnants of their foodstuff. And by doing so, he was cleansed of his previous sins. He goes on to explain to Vyasudeva about how he began to hear from them attentively bona fide information about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and how, by in that great association, by the mercy of those great Vaishnavas, his past sins were cleansed and he was liberated from the molds of material nature. He goes on to tell Vyasudeva that in that association, and by their mercy, his oral reception was purified, and how step by step his taste for hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead became manifest. For Sarvana Kirtana, the importance of hearing and chanting about Lord Krishna and his glories cannot be stressed enough. He goes on to tell Vyasudeva about how he developed definite realization in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and how his attention became uninterrupted in hearing about the Lord. It is said to hear about the absolute truth is to associate with the Supreme Light, and that Supreme Light will dissipate darkness of ignorance. I've read in Srila Prabhupada's purports, I can't remember now, that actually reading the Srimad Bhagavatam is one of the most important processes of hearing. He says that it is full of transcendental chanting and therefore full of transcendental mellows. He goes on to say later on in this purport that it's the natural affinity for the living entity to be engaged in the service of the Lord, and that this affinity becomes covered up when we come into contact with the modes of material nature, and that this Srimad Bhagavatam acts like a lamp of transcendental knowledge. And if we are fortunate enough to hear from realized devotees like Narada Muni, then we can also be successful on this path of devotional service. And we do have an opportunity to hear from him by reading these books. Now there was another great Vaishnava devotee who was taught by Narada Muni, and that is Bhakta Prahlad. What he says about devotional service I would like to share now. It's in the 7th canto, 5th chapter, text 23 through 24. Prahlad Maharaj said, hearing and chanting about the transcendental holy name, form, qualities, paraphernalia, and pastimes of Lord Vishnu, remembering them, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, offering the Lord respectful worship with the 16 types of paraphernalia, offering prayers to the Lord, becoming His servant, considering the Lord one's best friend, and surrendering everything unto Him. In other words, serving Him with body, mind, and words. These 9 processes are accepted as pure devotional service. One who has dedicated his life to the service of Krishna through these 9 methods should be understood to be the most learned person, for he has acquired complete knowledge. Now, Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, has explained this very nicely in his Tathaya. I think I'm saying that right. Tathya. Tathya? Am I saying that right? Tathya. 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 He's explained the 9 processes of devotional service very nicely. The first one is Shravan, and that is to lend oral reception to the Lord's transcendental names, His forms, His qualities, and His pastimes. He goes on to say that after hearing this, that we should memorize this transcendental vibration and repeat it. That is Kirtanam. Smaranam means to learn more and more about the Lord. Padasevanam means to become a servant of Lord Krishna. And then there is Archanam, to serve the deity in the temple, or the Murti of Lord Krishna. And then there is Vandanam, that is to offer respectful obeisances and prayers. The next one is, we should always think of ourselves as Krishna Nityadas, that is an eternal, everlasting servant of Lord Krishna. And then there is Sakyam. Sakyam is to think of oneself as a well-wisher and friend of Krishna. Now, as a well-wisher and friend of Krishna, we should preach this Vaishnava philosophy and try to induce others to surrender to Lord Krishna. And then there's Atma Nevadam, and that is to offer everything to Krishna, one's mind, body, and words. Now, if one takes up this process of devotional service, that is the path of bhakti. Not all of these are necessary to gain the mercy of the Lord. Even if we just execute one of them in all seriousness, then we can obtain the mercy of Lord Krishna. It says all over the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's so many different verses that stress the importance of hearing from the Srimad Bhagavatam. I would like to share a few of those now. The first one, I believe, is in the 12th canto, text 3. Somewhere in here. says in 12:13-15, the person who desires pure devotional service to Lord Krishna should hear the narrations of Lord Uttama Shoka's glories, qualities, the constant chanting of which destroys everything unauspicious. The devotee should engage in such listening in regular assemblies and should continue to hear throughout the day. Then the other day I was reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm in the 4th canto right now, the story of Dhruva Maharaj. And in Prabhupada's purport of 4.12.51, he says, the great sage Maitreya recommends that to enlighten people about the absolute truth, devotees should preach the teachings of Bhagavatam throughout the world. Srila Prabhupada goes on to say that Srila Vyasadeva compiled this Bhagavata Purana just to stop the ignorance of the mass of people. This was done so under the instruction of Narada. Recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam is especially meant to enlighten people about the absolute truth. And then there's a verse in the 1st canto, actually 2 verses, chapter 5, that really are one of my favorites. I have read all of Srila Prabhupada's books, many more than once, but I must say the Srimad Bhagavatam is my absolute favorite. I could get lost for hours in these pages. Let's see, Canto 1, Chapter 5, Text 10 and 11. Those words which do not describe the glories of the Lord, who alone can sanctify the atmosphere of the whole universe, are considered by saintly persons to be a place of pilgrimage for crows. Since the all-perfect persons are inhabitants of the transcendental abode, they do not derive any pleasure there. On the other hand, the literature which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, forms, and pastimes of the unlimited Supreme Lord is a different creation, full of transcendental words, directed toward bringing about a revolution in the impious lives of the world's misdirected civilizations. Such transcendental literatures, even though imperfectly composed, are heard and sung and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. Now I pulled a few things out of the purport that Srila Prabhupada wrote for this verse. He says, broadcasting the holy name and fame of the Supreme Lord, the polluted atmosphere of the world will change. And as a result of propagating the transcendental literature like Srimad Bhagavatam, people will become sane in their transactions. There is a great need for disseminating the messages of Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world. This reminds me of what Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master said about Shravana Kirtanam. We must receive oral reception of Srimad Bhagavatam, then memorize and repeat the transcendental vibration. There are so many unwanted literatures full of materialistic ideas for sense gratification. In general, people want to read. This is a natural instinct. But because their minds are polluted, they want such literature. Transcendental literature like Srimad Bhagavatam will diminish the activities of the corrupt mind and supply food for their hankering after reading something interesting. There needs to be a systematic propaganda for popularizing the reading of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Sri Narada Muni encouraged his pupil, Vyasadeva, to compose this literature, which can bring about liberation from all kinds of bondage. Srila Prabhupada says at the end of this purport that in the Bhagavad Gita, one who surrenders unto Krishna is very, very rare. And the fact that we're all sitting here and trying to surrender to Krishna is a very rare opportunity. Srila Prabhupada brought these books to us, and he painstakingly translated them very late in his life. And it's our duty to try to read them. They can't help us if we don't read. And like his spiritual master said, we should receive the vibration, and then we should memorize it and try to repeat it. I'm going to go ahead and read from Bhagavad Gita, that chapter, if I can find the Bhagavad Gita.
Up on the...
So we have a very rare opportunity now. We really should take advantage of it. It says in the 7th chapter, text 19, after many, many births, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes of all that is. And such a great soul is very rare. Srila Prabhupada goes on to say in his purport, The living entity, while executing devotional service or transcendental rituals, after many, many births, may actually become situated in transcendental pure knowledge that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal of spiritual realization. In the beginning of spiritual realization, while one is giving up an attachment to materialism, there is some leaning toward impersonalism. But when one is further advanced, he can understand that there are activities in the spiritual life, and that activities constitute devotional service. Realizing this, he becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrenders to Him. At such a time, one can understand that Lord Sri Krishna's mercy is everything, and that He is the cause of all causes, and that this material manifestation is not independent from Him. He realizes the material world to be a perverted reflection of spiritual variegatedness, and realizes that in everything there is a relationship with the Supreme Lord Krishna. Comments or questions?
Did it say a description of was Hamsa actually a swan?
That's what it says. Yeah. I found that very interesting.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
the interesting thing to me about that story was the four Kumaras were there too. Narada Muni was there and the four Kumaras were there, well, all of them.
In the beginning it says his mental sons. So that would be
Yeah,
the four Kumaras.
I think Narada Muni, well, he had said here, anyways. Anyway, but the four Kumaras, when they saw the Hamsa incarnation, they said, "Who are you?" they just asked him directly, "Who are you?" And then he gave him a rather enigmatic reply by which they had to figure out, oh, okay, I guess you're Supreme Personality of Godhead. What a kind of interesting dynamic.
There's so much we don't know.
Yeah, we only know a little bit, just he said he has unlimited incarnations, and we are only given a small portion of those. So it's really amazing when you think about it, it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Anything else?
You said somewhere it says about hearing the Bhagavatam is the very important part.
You said it.
It's in many places. It's actually in the Chaitanya Charitamrita as well. Lord Chaitanya says there's 5 principal activities for aspiring Vaishnavas, or those who are Vaishnavas, to reside in the holy place,
Right.
associate with devotees,
Yes.
worship Archa Vigraha form, chant Hare Krishna, study the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah, I can't remember where I read it, but
It's
everywhere. I've probably read it more than once.
Yeah. So, yeah. But that's Lord Chaitanya's instruction.
It's like I often say, chant Hare Krishna, it'll make you happy. But read Srila Prabhupada's books, it'll make you steady.
Yeah.
It'll keep you steady in your service.
So your hosts are going to say something more now.
Yes. I need to add something to that. I've been saying chant Hare Krishna and be happy for a while now. But yeah, the reading is so important. I mean, Srila Prabhupada, what he did for us is just amazing. And I often say I want to live my life in honor of him, and I honor him by reading his books.
Yeah, and personally I think reading means out loud.
I read out loud.
Yeah.
I read out loud.
But also there was a...
So I can actually hear it. There's something about being able
the sound
to hear
vibration,
the sound
right.
vibration.
Because I always have trouble controlling my mind. I could be reading and thinking something else. I'm reading, but my mind will drift.
It's really hard for it to drift when you're actually speaking it.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense.
Although I've done that too. The mind is I would like to know who the mind actually is, because
Right?
I don't really... I don't
It's like I always knew.
agree with what he's thinking.
I always knew the mind was different from the soul. Like I had two things going on. I knew there was,
Yeah.
It was like I always knew my mind and soul were two different things.
So what you said just prior to this about the chanting and then the reading helps you to... So somewhere around 1972, there was one specific letter that was sort of like a real, like a sort of what do you call it? Anyway, it was a pivotal moment, and in the Prabhupada was trying to stress the importance of studying and understanding the philosophy. And he gave this, he said that the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego, if you understand, that's the subtle covering of the soul.
Right.
Okay, so but the intelligence is the closest thing to the soul. False ego means the soul is identifying with the false thing.
Right.
But the intelligence is the closest thing to the soul. And if you understand this philosophy with your intelligence, then that will reawaken the soul and shatter the false ego. And your chances of being able to withstand all of the, obstacles that are going to come before you. Sort of like, those tests you see where people are, like a virtual driving test, or on these shooting ranges, they have these virtual people pop out and stuff. You just don't know what's going to pop out in front of you. Sometimes what's popping out in front of you is, oh, this is a good thing, this is going to help me in my Krishna causes. And then sometimes things pop out in front of you and like, oh no, this is not, I guess this is a dead end here. So, so by saturating your intelligence, that's what Prabhupada said, something like that you, that's what helps you to stay fixed.
I'm just reading the books, it's really the key. Yes.
I also find writing. Prabhupada said on many occasions, write your realizations. I want all my disciples to write every day the realizations. And sometimes with that realization means, oh, I feel like, But actually, I find that if I write down what I learned, I've discovered something cool here and write about it or something, write what I learned, or maybe make a study and outline a chapter or something like that. And that really helps too, because it's like in, out.
Yeah.
When you put out, then it helps you learn.
Well, I've noticed too, like when I'm studying for these classes, I'll write everything down. And if I'm struggling with something in my mind, I can actually go to that page and look at it. It helps me to recall it. So I can actually visualize it in my mind, what I've written down.
Well,
so it's another way to, to learn and to study. Memorize this vibration, as it says, memorize it.
Prabhupada, when he said about writing, he said, the thing about writing is you're choosing your words very carefully, as opposed to like when I'm speaking,
right.
You just it starts coming out and you stop. But if you sit down and write, you have the time to choose your words, and then he said that helps you to speak.
It's just a whole other way to really learn it and keep it with you.
So you're more effective, and you feel secure about what you're going to say. That was great. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Hare. Thank you, Madhavi, for jumping in the other day.
I knew how much she had studied this. I knew her because she asked me that.
I was ready.
So I knew. So I know you want to trade.
Thank you. Now to get ready for Saturday's class.